Hi, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and we are back for another segment of the STEM Block produced by Henry Wilkins, who is leading the charge to get a school back in the 5th Ward of Evanston. And the man is not giving up, and he's brought some very respected guests in the Evanston community. I still call her Alderwoman Delores Holmes, but she's former Alderman Delores Holmes, and she's groomed the new alderman, Robin Ruth Simmons, two very powerful Black women in our community. And then she has her grandson with us today, who's also an activist and community leader in education for our youth, Nikko Ross, and Kimberly Holmes Ross will be joining us a little later. But thank you so much, Henry. You always bring these awesome guests to the show. I've been trying to get Delores Holmes on like ever.
You see, it was a grandson that did it. You see that,
right? Yes, because I always want to speak to those who have the knowledge and the experience and the wisdom. They know what's been going on, what happened. And we all have heard the stories of what happened with the schools in the 5th Ward. And, you know, I was telling Henry a couple segments before that I spoke with Mayor, I still call her Mayor, Lorraine Morton. She talked about how beautiful the 5th Ward was.
Yes.
You know, back in the day, it was just very independent. Black community had their own everything, school, hospital, stores, everything.
Everything, yep.
And then she said it all came to an end and it just was never the same.
Right, yeah.
So now we've got a new generation of leaders. Henry Wilkins is like, oh no, we're gonna get this back going. We're gonna start with the school. So Henry, I know you want to start this.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I just want to say I am so fortunate and so blessed to be in the presence of such great titans. You know, Delores Holmes, I'll tell you about how I met her shortly, and Nikko and Kimberly Holmes Ross will be joining us shortly. I know she's running a few minutes late, but I mean, these folks are titans in the community. When we talk about the Hecky Powells of the world, this is, you know, this is what that group represents. So the first person I met was Kimberly Holmes Ross. So I actually met her at it was the introduction for Chief Cook. By the Evanston Own It group. And
okay.
I came up to Kimberly. I said, somebody said, hey, you need to meet her. I said, okay, I'll meet her. You know, hi Kimberly, my name is Henry Wilkins, trying to start a school, 5th Ward, a STEM school. She's like, oh, great. I said, but you know, we're gonna need a lot of help and we're gonna need a lot of support for this and going out to the community and getting the word out. She's like, oh, don't worry. She's like, I got it covered. She's like, I run this Advocates for Action group. They're trained. They actually go out in the community. So there's no need in reinventing the wheel. I said, okay, let's go. So fast forward to this past summer, and Advocates for Action was very helpful in getting the word out. So they were at Juneteenth. They were at the community picnic. The first night, had the purple shirts on, picking up email addresses, getting the word out there. So we probably, you know, garnered probably about 400, 500 people, you know, with just that effort. So great. The second person I met was actually Miss Holmes. So I was at a meeting with Dave Davis at Northwestern, and I was, you know, telling him about, you know, the vision for a school. And I said, you know, we got strong support. We got Hecky Powell and, you know, obviously Alderman Ruth Simmons supportive. He's like, well, you know, Delores Holmes is pretty important in Northwestern. I said, have you talked to her? I said, no, I mean, I know she, you know, retired and she was a former alderman. I said, he's like, no, did you talk to Delores Holmes? I said, no. I said, okay, I'm going to find her and I'm going to track her down. So I finally reached her and I said, hey, you know, I'm going to, you know, bring a STEM school to the 5th Ward. And she's like, Henry, she's like, I'm just tired. She's like, we've been trying to do this for so long. I'm getting up there in age. She's like, just let me know, keep me posted on whatever you're doing. And, you know, I'm supportive. I said, okay, let's go. So that was my story for Miss Holmes. And then Nikko. So I met Nikko. Actually, I was at his march last spring, and it was to save Family Focus. And it was a great turnout. I mean, people from all backgrounds, very diverse group, you know, strong numbers. I was like, man, this guy, whoever was running this thing, like, I'm impressed. I got to find out who this is. So I later found out, I mentioned, said, oh, it's my son. I said, your son? He's like, yeah, Nikko. I was like, oh, I got to meet your son. So I tracked down Nikko. I said, Nikko, I was like, man, I'm impressed with what you're doing. I love, you know, the energy that you're bringing with the young generation. And so we met, and I said, hey, you know, I'll share with him more details of the vision of a school. And he was like, yeah, we need it. He's like, you know, we need education in the Fifth Ward. So, so that was it. So that's my introduction. I want to turn over to these guys. I want people to hear from them. You know, like I said, we have 3 generations here. I know Ms. Holmes actually was a student at
Foster,
and it was a neighborhood school. So she has a different perspective, and Kimberly can share her perspective shortly, but she mentioned she went to King Arts Lab, which was a lab school. So it was open to all of Evanston.
And it was just called King Lab then. It wasn't King Arts. That came later.
Right, yeah, so King Lab. And so that was a whole different experience. So, and then she had kids where they were assigned to schools outside the Fifth Ward. So they were actually bused. So that has a different experience and a different perspective of, you know, what this would mean. So, so that's it. I'll jump on at the end, have a few, hope Kim's Advocates for Action has some stuff going on, and we have some stuff going on at Dawes Park, but we'll talk about that later. Right.
Yeah, it's, and Nikko has a relationship with the building as well, because as you know, well, Kim is my daughter, and she came to work for me, and then we had after school programs for kids. And so her kids came to Family Focus and sort of grew up there. So he feels very connected. Well, all 3 of them feel very connected to Family Focus. So the building means a lot to our whole family, because it has, I want to say it has passed through, or the family has passed through the building. I grew up at Foster, and I went to Foster from 3rd grade through 5th grade before I went to Haven for middle school. And Malika's absolutely right, Mayor Morton. And by the way, the titles are something you earn, so you don't lose them. So you're not incorrect when you say Mayor Morton. I grew up in just a wonderful Black community, not really needing to leave the Fifth Ward for anything, because we had everything that we needed within the community. And Foster School, as well as the churches, was our base. And that was, and that's probably true in African-American communities across the country. It was the schools and the churches that were the base of the community. So that was our foundation. I can remember the changes, but you know, when you're young, the changes don't mean the same as they do now. Everybody was happy to see big box stores coming in. And so we loved Walgreens, forgot about Doc Morrison, you know what I'm saying? Because it was new and shiny, you know, that kind of thing, not realizing the impact that was going to have on the community. Or you had at Kroger's, or I think it was called National Tea, rather than going to Mr. Smalls or Mr. Fleming's, you know, to the grocery store. So those kinds of things just sort of creeped in without, I don't want to say without us knowing, but without us knowing the impact that it was going to have on the community. And then of course the school. I remember the transition from the school when they decided to close it. My kids weren't, let me go back and say this. When they first started with the integration piece, I can remember that very well. And Edna Summers, who at that time worked for Project Head Start. And I was a Head Start parent. And my daughter, Kimberly, was in the Head Start program. And I remember when they were just talking about all of this stuff, they were going to be the changes, and Edna was very enthusiastic about making sure that our kids were going to have new books and new everything at Foster School. So the change was to make things better, not realizing what integration would really, I shouldn't say integration, but desegregation would really do for, for our community and closing the schools. And years later, when we talked, and she always said, that was one of the biggest regrets that she had, was being such an advocate for making those kinds of moves, and having our kids bust out of our community. Looked good and shiny in the beginning, but didn't turn out to be, that in the end. I remember when Coleman Miller was the president of NAACP when it happened, when they closed Foster School. I was the director at Family Focus. We were just opening Family Focus, getting ready to start up and all of that. And it was a big issue around it. And he sued the school district, the NAACP sued the school district. And they could not, they promised, one of the things that they said, they would never do anything with that building that wasn't for the betterment of the community. So it sat empty for many years. I believe it was from, I want to say 78, maybe 77, I can't remember the exact years, to 1983. And I know it's a well only because Pastor Norwood, who was a member of my Family Focus board, was on the school board at that time. And we were going like crazy with Family Focus. We had opened at Miller School, and then we had developed this out of necessity, this teen program that Drew Alexander had helped us get a building on Church Street where the Gibson Worson Center is now. And we had started that as the Family Focus Our Place. And we just outgrew it so fast, and we needed more space. And Reverend Norwood said, well, there's such Foster School over there. This would be a betterment for the community. And so went to Joe Hill and all of that, and went to the building. And I thought, oh my God, I hadn't been in Foster School for years since the kids had left. And I thought, what could I do with this building? It's just so much space. And then as we went in, there was water. We went down in the basement, water up to our knees. It was just horrible because they had just let it go to ruins, and they had stripped it of all of its copper piping and all of that. And so nevertheless, my board was sure that this was the right move. I wasn't so sure, but they were. And so we went to the board of District 65 and asked them to rent us the building, lease us the building for $1 a year, because we didn't have any money. And as it turned out, they said, well, they couldn't do that at $1 a year because of something with the state, but they would do it for $10 a year, but a limited amount of time. I think it was like 25 years or something like that, because we had asked for it forever. And then our issue was raising money to get it, up to where it was usable. And so I'm really sorry to hear now when I hear that there's all this asbestos still in the building, because it wasn't disturbed at that time. So we only removed what was necessary. So we raised money through the Neighborhood Technology Center, actually, were really good partners that worked with us to do that kind of stuff. So we got it up and running in Open Family Focus in 83. Nevertheless, we could never replace what was missed for the kids in the community. We did all kinds of after school programs. We had a relationship with Haven, with Don Mitchum, and we ran so the kids would not be, when they got suspended from school, that they wouldn't just be at home. He put a teacher over there, and we had classes right there at Family Focus. We always knew the education piece needed to be there. So when I say that, when I told Henry I'm tired, I really am tired, because I know that when they closed the school, they did not do a referendum. They just closed it. And so my position always was, and I had told Jerome this when Jerome Summers was really working really hard to get the school going. And it would have gone except the 6th Ward who voted overwhelmingly not to do it. That if they didn't need a referendum to close it, then they don't need a referendum to open it. And so I really hold the school board accountable because they could do it if they wanted to. And I've always said they just didn't want to do it. Number one, they want to make sure they can keep the numbers up in their own neighborhood schools in terms of trying to be, as I think it's Father Oldershaw who says, with our drive-by diversity, because they want to make sure they have Black kids in those schools. So I think that's only my opinion, but I really feel that way. Because they know our kids have to get up so early in the morning and stand on the corners from 7:30 waiting for buses. It's just not right. And it's been going on for years. So that's where I am with it. I'm always willing to help in any way that I can. But in the end, it is the school district's responsibility and they need to do it. They owe it to this community. And I remember this last effort before Henry with Jerome, they did some kind of survey and within the neighborhood where most of the kids would come from, I think would been like from Green Bay West to maybe Brown or something like that. But anyway, and they said most of the parents said no, they didn't want to change their schools. Well, of course they didn't want to change their schools. They didn't know what would be coming to their own neighborhoods. It's as simple as that. So you can't say that they didn't want a new school in there. They didn't even know what a new school would be. And like one of the big questions was space. Where could it be? Of course, they were talking about the Family Focus building. And by the way, another story, in 2002, we had worked with Hardy Murphy, who had come up with a plan to do a K-3 school in the Family Focus building. Now, I retired in July, but we had started to work in 2000 and had worked all the way up. And I know they had voted, I want to say in that spring, that they were going to do it. I retired in July. And then the next thing I know, they said they didn't have any money, so they weren't going to do it. I mean, I can't remember the dates exactly, but I was just like, oh, I could not believe it because it was just all out. I mean, Hardy had done it. And we knew that if we could get our kids that much of a head start, they would certainly begin to close the gap because they needed something in their own neighborhoods. And if we just did K-3, and let the 4th and 5th graders be bused, it was just better, because they were older. So that's another piece to my foster school saga when I say I'm tired. It's just there's been so many pieces that I've been involved in that just didn't pan out, that it makes me sad, makes me sad for my community. So that's just where I am with it. And, as far as both Kimberly and Nikko are concerned, I'm just ecstatic because both of them have the same kind of drive and passion for the community that I have, and which I got from my parents, that you just have to do your part. And so it's just really nice to see both of them doing some of this work.
Why is it that when there is a Black agenda that's going to help to develop and strengthen our Black youth, funding, all of a sudden there's no money.
Right. Right.
All of a sudden there's all these little reasons. So what is the reason now? Because I've seen Evanston come up with some money for other things. I'm like, well, where did that money come from? And where did that money come from?
Like Robert Crown, right?
Right. The Robert Crown money. I mean, even the money from the federal government during this COVID-19 to feed the homeless. And I'm like, okay, so y'all gonna take care of the homeless first, which of course, take care of our homeless, but what about, it's so many other things that are in dire need that's been an injustice. So what's the excuse now? because the parents in the Fifth Ward, they know now, okay, we can get a school in the Fifth Ward. So now what's the problem?
Well, I think one of the things that people have to learn and to separate, they have to learn to separate the city from the school district because it's two separate funding bodies.
Mm.
So that's number one. So, and I know that's hard sometimes for our people to understand because when you say the city, they just think that encompasses everything and it really doesn't.
Mm.
And, you know, the school district, I think, I forget the percentage, but I know it's really big. It's more than 50% of the tax base. And I think the city is, I don't even think it's quite 20%. So you have to look at it from that in terms of money. So like when you talk about just this COVID-19 and the dollars from the feds, that goes to the city for city services. Now the city has its problems, believe me, because you know, getting rid of a lot of the social services and that kind of thing, they've gotten us into even more problems. But the school district, it's not that they don't have the money, because the money is there. It all depends on how you want to spend the money. But Malika, you know, the system is not designed for us at all. Not for us to ever be successful. So until those, I say to people, you know, you can tell me Black Lives Matter all you want, but until you begin to change the system and show me that Black Lives Matter, then, you know, I'm not impressed.
What kind of moves can we